Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for...
It's go time! UnSpun.
Go time, George-Affleck.
Go time.
Counting
what day
down.
Is it? Let me check my... Less than 1 month. 1 month from today, it's the 16th here of September. You'll be waking up in the morning going, who's my mayor? Who's my council? What do I got here? Or you'll be going, oh my God, my mayor.
I know, I'm afraid that I'll be the latter there, but I will vote. And I think obviously everybody should vote. And we have been talking about knowing your candidate. It's getting ever more difficult to really know your candidate because the spin is so entrenched, but there's some new pieces of the political puzzle coming to light, and we're going to get to a couple jurisdictions, but let's start with Vancouver first.
Yes,
Did I just say a party name?
You said no. I think it's a former party name. One of the many parties we've had in Vancouver.
Exactly.
This was interesting. This guy from the Courier, he's actually a homeless guy named Woodfoot. Oh God, no, I'm sorry. Anyways, it'll come to me. I'll tweet him out. He found in his dumpster diving some paperwork that included all this information about fundraising for, it appeared, Kennedy-Stewart's campaign in Vancouver. And, it was interesting because of the names on this list. And they had this thing called team captains. It was basically an inside look at how fundraising works for a political party. It was a bit confusing because people were tweeting, and I was also looking. This is a interesting, another hit to the crappy policy that the NDP developed related to municipal finance reform in elections, because it doesn't. What they created created all sorts of opaque processes, no lack of transparency. In this case, it's hard to know what this list was. They aren't claiming it's theirs necessarily, but they're also saying, hey, we're fundraising. It appears what the list was
at the UBCM. At the UBCM, they basically admitted.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's basically what it could have been. Like, there's two things that I always have a problem with fundraising and the way the policy works is it's created what I call PACs, where they have, like, the United States, you have these groups of people that create these third-party organizations that raise funds that are completely distant from the campaign, but of course are supportive of candidates, and that money they can come from anywhere. And then there's the whole $1,200 limit. Can't be corporate. And so what in this case, you could see what was happening. I think I saw Raymond Lou's name on there. $2,500 was his goal. Well, so, put his $1,200 and perhaps his wife or one of his kids is $1,200. Then you got your $2,500. In other cases, you have $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for certain people to raise. Where you got to find people to give $1,200, and it just begs the question of who do you know that can find 40 people to give $1,200 or 100 people to give $1,200, and how do you talk them into that? And strange that they're all the same last name or work for the same company or whatever. It just creates a whole bunch of what I hate, opaque financing of elections.
Because somebody who's organized and strategic about that is still going to benefit in a way that they might have in the old system, where somebody who is legitimately trying to do it by the book, by the rules, will be buried.
Yeah.
There must be. What's the better way? What would you suggest? How would you suggest it best work? I guess is my question.
Well, the $1,200 limit's it should be higher. Let's be serious. It's that's the provincial limit too. If an individual wants to give $10,000, then that's fine. I think the limit should be increased, and there should be real-time transparency. So when the money comes in, it goes. You submit it. Your name has to go on the books in real time. So you go on. The technology's there. It's not hard to do fundraising with GoFundMe. But also, it's really about what happens in between elections. And I keep saying this. I've said this since I got elected in 2011, with Vision Vancouver raising millions and NPA also raising tons of money. But once the election was over and you're in office, your party, you don't know what they're raising. You don't know how much money, where the money's coming from. The transparency is just not there. And I think that should change, because if you're in office and your party's raising funds, then it begs the question of influence once you're in power. And if you don't know, I mean, elections are one thing, but you have no power until you're actually in office. And, the whole, well, you owe me if I gave you money for your election, I think it's more about when you're in office and and there's funding happening behind the scenes that's paying for operations for you to win the next election.
Isn't there a bit of a possibility of investigation? I'm not sure where it's at really, but I don't know that we're really surprised by it, because you and I have been talking about how City of Vancouver letterhead have been coming out with like campaign-like press releases for Kennedy-Stewart.
And Colleen Harvick's filed a complaint about that.
Let's talk that through, because there are nerds. We're nerds, and most people aren't. So explain that.
Right. Well, I mean, the Colleen Harvick, and she's running for mayor, and she's filed a complaint. She's got Bill Thielman on her team, and he knows the regulations quite well. And this is, they filed a complaint to the province saying this is not that staff working on the campaign while they were being paid by City Hall is inappropriate. But I've gone down this road when I was in office with the mayor, and got shot down several times. So it's more of a PR play for them, I think, than anything. I don't think it'll go anywhere. One of the things that's interesting, I think, we talked about turnout last time, and I think it's going to have the lowest turnout. And it's not necessarily, it is partly related, in Vancouver anyways, to lack of interest or, lackluster candidates, disappointment in the quality that all of them represent. But also, you may hate the money that these parties used to get, but you see a direct correlation to funding. When 2014, turnout was, I think, 43% in Vancouver. I think Vision raised 2 point something million. NPA raised 1 point or whatever million. In the last election, they both, in 2018, both those parties, which were the main parties, raised under $1 million, around $1 million. And you saw turnout go down to 38%. This election, I think you'll even see less than that potentially being raised, which there's a direct correlation to turnout, because you got to get the vote out, and getting the vote out, the city does its advertising. But really, if you have two parties spending $2 million each in a market, people know an election's happening, and they know a lot about the candidates, and because they hear about it, they see it, they read it.
You hear about it because it's on radio ad nauseum, or it's everywhere ad nauseum.
Or just phone calls.
Phone calls too. But you talked about the Ken Sim ads on CKNW about road costing, attacking the Kennedy-Stewart road costing and what have you. And there's been some news around that ad in particular. It's been pulled because of its inaccuracy or its misleading.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know
that just happened, I think, late yesterday. I got a flag on that.
So they must have ad standards. Canada, there's media are required to follow certain standards. Unlike some social media sites, there are regulations for CRTC and the news media in general, and traditional news media have to follow certain regulations. In the case of radio, there are these ad standards that you have to follow, and honesty is part of that. So I wonder if they didn't comply. If there was a complaint,
I think it was
probably Kennedy-Stewart's campaign.
Kennedy-Stewart's campaign, that it walked a line. It inferred something that was not confirmed. So it's like, and you know this all too well. You work in communications, crisis communications, PR and marketing with Curve Communications, and you know that the whole political dance, the spin, lives in dancing next to that line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. If you want to get people talking, push the envelope, because what happens is, there's the ad campaigns that you run that push the envelope, and then people get angry and they start talking about it in the media for free. So you get all this free coverage. So, you and I talking about that ad being pulled is still positive PR for Ken Sim in a way.
Right.
It gets media talking about it. And that's one of the main goals of it. To be provocative in your ad buy, that leads to public relations, whether it be good or bad. There's the old adage, there's no such thing as bad PR. For the most part, that's true. It's just like, if you're not talking about me, then I'm in trouble. If you're talking about me, then I'm, that ad did resonate to a lot of people. I don't think that issue is the issue that's going to.
I just remember you saying, I have heard that ad so many times. There's an old adage in radio. By the time we who are on the radio are sick of an ad, the audience is hearing it for the very first time. So people who are P1s, the people that are listening constantly and are like, I hate that ad every time. There are a couple of listeners who are like, every time that ad comes on, I have to change the station. I'm like, I feel you, sister. I know. But there are people who've never heard that ad before. When the rest of us are singing along with the Doors Galore jingle, right? Like, but let's sorry, gotta get your doors at Doors Galore. I mean, it's entrenched in my brain.
Sponsorship availability at
that's right. Mike, give us a call. Let's talk about Surrey a little bit, because I did see something on social media with regard to that mayoral race, and the mudslinging certainly has begun, but something, I'm not going to say a little offside, I'm going to say super offside today. I don't know who the person is who's at the root of the tweet, and I went to the bio, and we're not following any of the same people. The Twitter handle is under Alba Celesti. I don't know, but a screen cap of one of the tweets, and I wish I had it up here at my fingertips, but Taranjeet Parmar, a former colleague of mine at Roundhouse Radio, she was at News 1130, now she's with CBC, doing a great job. Bhupinder Handal, who is the news director, executive in charge of Global BC, and then Jazz Johal. Okay, so 3 South Asian prominent journalists. This particular tweet came at those 3 specifically, basically saying, I can see why you're coming after Doug McCallum, using your platforms to come after Doug McCallum in order to support the South Asian candidate to become mayor. Like, it was just, I read it and I'm like, this is racism. This is racist right here. I can't believe what I'm seeing here. And then I thought of you, because I just saw it all go down. Like, it's just moving on Twitter now. I find it distasteful, disgusting, and wrong, frankly. But this is the mud. This is the ugly, right? With less than a month to go, we're going to see more of. Oh yeah,
totally. And I've seen some polling for Surrey, by the way, and Doug McCallum's in single digits. So it doesn't look like he has any chance of winning at this point. Some of the polling I've seen, which is interesting. The Giant Stadium didn't resonate. It just kind of, well, I think it's a cool idea because I lived out in the Valley, grew up out there. And if you grew up in the Valley, you kind of go, yeah, I want a stadium out here. But it just added to his crazy issue that he's got, the foot getting run over, the court case. He's
outrageous,
getting too fringe for the voters there now. And so they're looking at alternatives. So that's why it gets ugly. When things get, when people start getting scared about losing, or there's a chance that you can win if you do something differently, then it gets kind of ugly. And you'll see that part of that, what you said about Ken Sims' ad, filing complaints and lawsuits and, the stuff that I've been seeing related to Drex, people complaining he works at Jack FM. He's the morning show host there, and complaining to his boss about things he's saying on the radio and tweeting or something. And it's like, oh God.
Not just to his boss, like directing people to complain to the radio station and to the CRTC. Like, that is so incredibly offside. I have no time for people who do that. And it was basically outed where DMs were flying around, and somebody who received one of those DMs screen capped it and tweeted it. And that's how Drex found out about it. And he started the hashtag Know Your Candidate. And anybody who would do that, coming at people's jobs for having an opinion on your political leanings, that's garbage. That is somebody who is trying to manage the free press in a desperate way that's gross. It's really it's unbecoming of Canadians, in my opinion. And we'll get into federal politics in a sec. But before we go federal,
actually on your show last night, we're talking. You had Brad West on, and I think that's on the other side of the coin where politicians are getting. He did I think it was a scoop for you guys. I hadn't heard.
It was. We didn't know it going in.
Show. Yeah, and you guys are on Check TV every Thursday at 8 o'clock. I PVR it, so I'm watching it. Thursdays at 8, and Brad was on there, and he talked about him and his family their lives being threatened, and this is significant. I mean, I have had people annoying me. I know Melissa de Genova in Vancouver's had her family threatened and has gone very far down the road of, like you have with your issues related to threats. I never had that kind of stuff happen to me, but it's just to see that Brad West getting that is, I mean, he's a super nice guy.
So I'm going to explain this. Let me give this to you because
PoCo.
Linda and I were gobsmacked because we don't do a pre-interview and tell people what we're going to ask or say. But we're welcome. Come in, sit down, let's talk for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so, but of course we had he was coming back from the UBCM, 37 mayors across British Columbia have been acclaimed. So they had no one run against them. So boom, on the day where all the filings are required, you're just mayor again. So we were going to go to all of these spots and places with Brad, and we got to touch on some things, but he kind of paused when we were speaking to the vitriol that because maybe the fact that so many are acclaimed because people don't want to go into politics, because people don't want to get targeted this way. And he said, this is the first time I'm going to share this, but it was at the root of it, George. And this is what's so incredible to me is that it started about a bylaw that Brad West has nothing to do with and no power to change or manage. This individual in Port Coquitlam had an issue and then decided it wasn't getting resolved to his satisfaction, started coming for the mayor. The mayor tried to cool the situation. And then this individual came with death threats to Brad. Then he went to Brad's wife, and then he went to Brad's children. And that's when Brad took it to authorities. Authorities took it to the Crown. Good on the Crown for taking it seriously and charging this individual. This individual has entered a guilty plea. Now the question is, what might the consequences be? Because this guy didn't just threaten over email and which should be bad enough, frankly, but showed up at City Hall with a replica gun.
Whoa, that's serious shit. That doesn't happen in Canada. Usually that's, especially at a municipal level, but that is crazy.
That's crazy. I thank the mayor for sharing his story. And if you watch it back, I watched it back. I hate watching myself on TV. It's why I like to do things live. I don't like listening to myself either, but I was watching and I could watch my face become triggered because I was just I felt ill for him. I felt do not do that. Be angry, make change. Write letters, vote,
your person.
Phone, but
you can't do that for Brad. But that's
don't threaten people.
No.
Don't.
That is just. This is what discourages. That's why you have probably 37 people not running and trying to compete with other mayors, having been in office. There is this personal space. I guess you have to accept that. But I do know it's interesting. When John Cooper decided he was not going to run for the MP, there was a rumor that I was going to be taking his place. Yeah. And I heard from a couple of people that some other parties, I won't say which ones, were digging up dirt about me and they were going to expose me. And I'm like,
the dogs are going off. Doorbell.
They agree with me.
Hey.
The dogs,
come on, dogs
in the house.
Dogs. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself while they bark, and then you can carry on. Hold on.
Yeah, no. So the key, this was really interesting, and they were putting together some kind of dossier of things. Probably I said on this show, and I'm thinking, I pretty much can stand by everything I've ever probably said on the show, and feel pretty confident that I'd be able to defend most of what I said. Because I say pretty much the same things over and over again all the time. It's not much. It's not. And I said it when I was in office too. These aren't. This is not a coup of to get what I've said. Anyways, obviously I'm not running for mayor, but it's just you hear that and you're like, bleh, bleh. Oh, you're muted. You're muted now.
Sorry. Am I back now? The dogs were mad on your behalf because I remember we were going back and forth on this, and how disgusting is it that even before it's confirmed that you might do something, people just made but they already had an arsenal built of the strategy of how to come after your credibility, your character, and who you are. I think that speaks to just how flawed politics has become, particularly at the municipal level, where we really have an opportunity to make change for the better in our city. Imagine if all of the energy of going into the sparkly things and the ribbon cuttings and the letter writing campaigns and whatnot, and all of that energy actually went into cleaning streets, collecting garbage, taking care of, right?
Jody.
I'm such a naive.
You definitely can't run for office.
I know I can't. I never would. I would lose my mind in one council meeting.
I saw Linda ask you that. I think it was Linda asked you that last night. I was like, oh, I know you've been asked many times.
You asked me once.
Yes.
You did. Are you would you? And I'm like, no. I remember we were sitting at the diner. I barely knew you then, but I was like, I'm going to tell him the truth, man.
Well, I thought maybe that's what you were trying to pick my brain, because people often would take me out for lunch to find out how it all works. So I thought that's what you were up to.
Oh, look at us finding out about our first real away from work get together. I want to pick your brain, speaking of, because I do want to pick your brain on this. Pierre Poilievre. And sort of since he was named leader of the Conservative Party with 68% of the vote. I mean, not unsurprising. But what has taken place since? How have you watched that unfold?
Well, I mean, I think yours and mine and most of us who work as in the media now, and I used to be a politician, and I always respected media, and I did interviews with Rebel. Oh God, I did. I was fine. If you want to talk to me, talk to me. I did interviews with CBC on occasion, whenever 3 times they called me. But I was always open to, as you have said many times, that I was always open to. You said that to Brad last night, Brad West, to him always being available. That's important. I'm not paranoid about the media having, and if you've worked, and having myself worked as a journalist before I got into politics way back at CBC, and then now working again back in at CKNW and doing this show and other stuff that I do. That there's just not this conspiracy. It doesn't exist. There's no time for that. What it's like, the stuff you got. If there's anything, it's either laziness or just bad journalism, because there's no time or whatever. Right. But generally, most of the reporters and people I know are just kind of trying to get the stories told, and they're not sitting there with a hidden agenda. They really aren't. Anyways, but unfortunately, David Aitken came at him right after he became the leader and won that leadership thing. And David Aitken, who's with Global, apologized. He said, yeah, that was maybe a bit aggressive. He did put an apology out there, but it fed into Pierre Poilievre's, and there's this paranoia that I feel like exists with so many politicians now that is misguided. I just worry about that, and I think that it's a really slippery slope and a really bad way to go. We need journalism provide the checks and balances to politicians. They keep them honest. They literally do. You do not want to get caught doing something illegal, and the likely people that are going to catch you are journalists. So your paranoia of journalists should only be based on if you're dishonest or something conniving. It's not if you do good work and you care and you're honest. You shouldn't be worried about journalists. They're not going to plant stuff. They just, that's the key. Your other parties might, but I mean, you have to just kind of expect that's the key. There's some dirtiness in politics, but mostly journalists are just trying to do their job. They really are. Right. Anyways. Answer the question. Pose the question, answer the question. If you have nothing to hide, there's a clear answer to the question. The people who want to spin the agenda of the press usually are the ones with the agenda. I'm just going to put that out there. I also want to touch on crime because... But just on the final note on that, having worked as a reporter and put a mic into people's faces, and then there are people, certainly from my point of view, when I was in the office, like Francis Beulah. When Francis Beulah would call you, you'd be like, "Oh God, what's this going to be about? This is going to hurt. This is going to leave a mark." Something stupid. Or Bob Mackin, who he does some diligent, cool stuff. He's tenacious. And when he calls you, you're like, okay, I got to be, I got to think about what I'm going to say here, or what's going on. I mean, these are, even if it has nothing to do with you, right? Like, even if it has nothing to do with you, and that's, it's how you might become the soundbite about a story. Yeah. You have to make sure that you know what you're talking about. And this is really big for me. I have so much respect for someone who says, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. As opposed to trying to say something, just say, I don't know. And you know what? We're parents. We're parents, right? What's the thing you tell your kids? Don't lie, because it's really hard to keep track of your lies. You're just going to have to remember that lie. I mean, sometimes I worry about when you have to come up with a fib for your family member because whatever reason, and then you forget, oh, what was that thing I had to say to them to make sure that I was at that thing, and it's too complicated.
I want to just jump in here before we run out of time, because we also on the show, not that this is always going to be a debrief of Steele and Vance, but last night we did have two exceptional guests. If you want to watch it, go to the Check Plus app and watch it. Howard Chow, Deputy Police Chief for the VPD, joined us in studio, as well as Brad West. Interestingly enough, both from PoCo. So Howard Chow was like, "You're my mayor." I mean, there was a really cool moment between the two of them, and seeing the authentic side of both of these individuals in a more relaxed setting.
I wish you were my mayor in Vancouver, where I work.
Yeah, pretty much. But it was really interesting. Howard Chow threw down a stat about the spiking crime in Vancouver that you and I have been talking about, that the current mayor has been in denial of, but just now coming around, now that it's election time, to the fact that it is actually crazy in this town right now.
Something. Yeah.
But the 76% of the random attacks for a day, on average, random attacks, stranger attacks in Vancouver, are mental health issues, like exacerbated mental health problems, right? And then the repeat offender, which is a different bucket. He's like, there are many buckets, but in the universe of crime that we're facing, the other bucket is the repeat offender bucket. And that is largely, if not completely, rooted in addiction and the crisis associated with the need to feed the addiction, the petty theft and crimes, the over and over and over and over and over again, and where the support system just isn't in place. And Howard Chow actually very much had responsibility on the VPD, which I found to be refreshing. He said, it's a breakdown of multiple areas, the pillars that we've talked about, George. And one thing I found really interesting from both Brad West, Mayor West, and Howard Chow was how the time for studies and reports and what have you are over. Like, we need to actually try things, and if they don't work, we move it forward. And I think that comes back to some of the frustration surrounding what our health minister, Adrian Dix, has had to say publicly about the falling down of and the crumbling, really, of our healthcare system in BC.
It's a train wreck that we've seen coming for a while, and whether it be mental health or just physical health. And his answers at UBCM, the health minister, were just not there. He got attacked big time by Yvonne Palmer, Francis Beulah. You're not answering the question, Minister. What are you going to do about this healthcare crisis that we are in, that we saw coming, that I've heard predicted since I was a kid, with the aging population, and couple that with this mental health care challenge that because of cutbacks and changes to the way we do this stuff. And we've talked about this on the show many times. 30 years ago, it's a generational problem we've put ourselves in with related to mental health care and housing. I still think, though, for this election, for the municipal election, housing is still the number one. Housing and affordability, but housing is definitely still. We could talk about crime. But it's still niche, I think, as far as winning this election. And so this is where Colleen Hardwick's team, I think, falls down, where their housing plan is really, to most people, it seems limiting. And then you've got on the other end of the spectrum, Mark Marison's very aggressive, but the other two lead candidates are kind of their plans are meh. So that's why this election is so boring. But crime,
it's a horse race right now. It's a horse race right now between Ken Sim and Kennedy-Stewart, right? It is. So,
the other candidates will be the upsets. They'll.
But that's what I mean. Okay, so let's lay this down for somebody who's like, I don't care about municipal politics. All I know is I hate what's happening and what's going to happen. And you've said this from day one of all of these candidates. It feels like we've been doing this for 18 months for this coming election. Like, seriously. But
there's exhaustion out there for sure.
Kennedy-Stewart and Ken Sim right now, those are your front runners. Those are your two. And on the right hand side of the spectrum, whether it be fiscally conservative or somewhat conservative or all the way to the right conservative, there are five candidates or whatever on the right and one on the left. Right? So
I mean, Mark Marison might argue he's centrist, but and leans to the left, but he's got ties to the BC Liberals, which would be perceived as right wing,
as conservative. So when people are splitting the vote on that side of the spectrum, whatever calling it right conservative, whatever you want to call it, when people are splitting the vote, it's literally handing the mayor's office to the person on the left. Yeah.
Yes, potentially. I mean, it's also about turnout. So, this is undecided. I don't think I've ever seen, I mean, depending on the poll you see, but the latest one from Mayor, I think it's 50% undecided. It's like insane, number of undecided voters. If you're looking at 40 to 60% undecided, less than a month out of an election, you've got an electorate that's either completely given up or completely blech. And so the turnout will be a challenge. So the key for Kennedy-Stewart to win and what he might is his ability to get the vote out. We talked about this where's his campaign as far as advertising? We saw his fundraising information as we talked about at the top. Yeah. What's that money going to? You've heard, we talked about
radio ads.
Ad campaigns. Yeah. Obviously, he's spending a lot of money. Yeah. Money is what it will take to win. It's not only the advertising, but get the vote out. You got to get your vote out. So for Ken Sim to win, he's got to get every single MPA vote, every single one of them. He's not going to get every single one because Colleen's got a chunk of those, and Fred Hardin's going to get a chunk of those. Right. So he's got to find another 30,000 votes. Whereas Kennedy-Stewart knows he could say comfortably he'll get the same vote that he got last time, if not more, because he doesn't have competition.
And people are really pissed at Kennedy-Stewart. There are lots of people, because even the undecideds, when I ask people, but here's the thing, George, and I'm basically agreeing with you, is that people are have such distaste with where the city is at right now that they're mad at Kennedy-Stewart about it, and they voted for him last time, but they're not saying, and I'm going to go vote for Ken Sim.
Yeah,
they're like, I might just stay home.
I'll come, or they'll say, I'll give him one more chance. To beat an incumbent after one term, it just, I mean, Donald Trump, he denies it, of course, is an example in the States, but it's very, very, very unusual. Jimmy Carter, Joe Clark didn't even in Canada, I mean, it's just unusual to lose. It just would be, it'd be unprecedented that would happen.
I know for sure when I vote on October 15th, 2022, just under a month from now, I know for sure who I'm not voting for on the park board.
Yes, well, that's and some of those who've moved into council, I'm sure you won't be voting for them.
I am never voting for anybody who sat on the agenda side of the park board, the Green Cope Alliance that has destroyed Stanley Park. Have you seen Stanley Park? Pine beetles. My favorite monkey tree is dead. That has been there my entire life. The monkey tree, as you're going north across Landscape Bridge, it is completely destroyed by pine beetle. It's going to get so much worse in Stanley Park. I'm disgusted at how it has been left to die a sad death so that
I'm not even going to say the words bike lanes.
Ride around like a velodrome. I hope you enjoyed your time in the trees, because all the trees are now. Anyways, we'll leave it there.
What's our handles?
George
_
Affleck on Twitter, George _Affleck on Twitter, at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on Twitter, unspunpodcast.com. Sign up, click the link, you'll get it. Subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. We don't sell your information. You just get this glorious entertainment weekly, right, George?
I can't guarantee that, actually. How much are you willing to pay for that? How much are you willing to pay for it? No, I'm kidding. Of course not.
Get out of here.
I don't have time to do that. All right, we'll see you next week, and have a great weekend. Bye.